Freddie here from Points Panda, in collaboration with GoBackpacking.com, here to do something a little different today and cover my experience going to North Korea.
I'm taking one of you guys too.
Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy it, and if you really like the videos on my channel, please hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything and it helps me make future videos. To be clear, this channel is still going to focus on credit cards, travel hacking, and points, but once in a while, maybe once a month, I'll share some of my travel videos of my former travels as well. So I wanted to do this video to give a neutral, honest opinion of my experience.
Golders and tombstones of the period of Koryo dynasty.
I've seen so many travel bloggers taking the same vanilla organized tour I did and making it seem like their life was in danger, or using it as a chance to either heap unnecessary praise on the country, or on the other side, shit all over it. This video is more for those that are curious to see an unbiased review on what a tour to the DPRK, also known as North Korea, is like.
Warm welcome to the DPRK, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
The reason I went in 2013 is North Korea only opened to Americans in 2012, and I knew it wouldn't be long until either the US administration bans Americans from going, or North Korea's government bans Americans from going. Honestly, I'm surprised it was 5 full years until the Trump administration banned Americans from going. So I'm really happy I took the opportunity in that 5-year stretch to get to visit a country that very, very few Americans have been to.
Tonight, the Trump administration is countering the North Korean message, announcing it will ban Americans from traveling to North Korea starting in late August.
And so just a quick mention that unfortunately as of 2017, Americans can no longer visit under criminal penalties, and most importantly, the permanent invalidation of their passport. Not worth it, guys. So if you don't know a lot about North Korean tourism, you have to go on a guided tour with a Western tour company that links up with the North Korean tour company called KITC. You can also arrange a solo tour, but you're still gonna have multiple minders with you at all times. So there's a lot of tour companies, but I went with Young Pioneer Tours that I highly recommend for visiting North Korea or any obscure or politically fragile locations. I've used them to go to Venezuela, Haiti, Trans-Siberian, and a couple other spots. Booking the tour is actually pretty easy, and getting the North Korean visa is pretty easy as well. It's the Chinese visa. If any of you guys have been to China, know that's pretty much a nightmare. Fortunately now, at least before Corona, they offered a 72-hour visa waiver for China. In the future, if they reinstate the 72-hour visa waiver, you could go into and out of North Korea from Beijing with enough time to not need to get a Chinese visa. So check the corresponding article below for the latest updates. That program is being temporarily canceled. As of now, no one's getting into China, but they will probably reinstate it again at some point in 2021. So virtually all tours start in Beijing, where you'll have a bit of a debriefing, what you're not allowed to talk about, the taboos, which is obviously mainly the human rights situation. You can get your guides in a lot of trouble if you talk about that in North Korea. And some smaller taboos as well, like they don't like being called North Korea. They prefer you call it by their official name, the DPRK, or also the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And so of course, since this is a credit card, travel hacking, and aviation channel, I have to talk about the famous Air Koryo, the only one-star airline on Skytrax. So we took an old Tupolev jet. It was clearly a very old plane, but pretty well kept up. Kind of those 70s color shades of maroon and yellow, and I'm sure a lot of aviation geeks already know that North Korea is basically heaven for AV geeks that want to ride old planes. So the airplane ride from Beijing to Pyongyang is pretty short. It's about 2 hours. The in-flight entertainment screen was various tracks of the Moranbong band being played. We were served kind of tasteless ham sandwich, kind of expect to be economy in general, and given a bunch of propaganda magazines which served as great souvenirs. Immigration and customs also very fast, especially on the way in, and then we were off to the Yanggakdo hotel.
This is North Korea. A room.
So 95% of foreign tourists either stay in the Yanggakdo hotel or the nearby, slightly more upscale Koryo hotel. The Yanggakdo hotel is located on an island in the middle of the Taedong River. You can go outside, but you are not allowed to leave the island alone. Downstairs in the Yanggakdo hotel is a bowling alley, and what I'm told is the only legal casino in the entire city. Probably the best part of the hotel is the incredible view. My room was on the 28th floor, and the views really didn't disappoint. I mean, you could see the whole city. So where did I go on this tour? I started in Beijing, flying to Pyongyang. Then we went to Kaesong, the DMZ, and a coastal city called Nampho. Then I flew back to Beijing and caught a flight to Dandong, and in the end I took a ferry boat from Dandong to Incheon, South Korea. The tour I did was pretty standard. Tour companies try to make it seem like all the tours are really different, but the reality is about 70% of the sites you'll see on a carefully scripted North Korea tour are the same. However, each tour does get a few non-propaganda type sites, like visiting a factory or a farm. But make no mistake, the vast majority of the sites you'll be visiting are monuments and statues praising the Kim family, and all the tours take you through the monuments of Pyongyang, the demilitarized zone, and places such as the Children's Palace, where you're almost definitely going to see a performance by the gifted children. So I'm going to pull up a map here so you guys can see that the vast majority of the sites are going to be on a small stretch of land hugging the Taedong River, such as the Kim Il-sung Square. Other sites just north of the map include the Arch of Triumph, Kim Il-sung University, and the Juche Tower east of the river. So you'll be bussed around to all the sites, and in one case you may get to take the subway. You'll quickly realize you could easily walk to almost all of the significant sites, but they choose to bus you around anyways. One of our first stops was the Mansundae Hill Grand Monument, a large complex with the two statues of the original Kims, and flanked on the two sides are these two elongated bronze murals of the various workers of the revolution, soldiers, farmers, being patriotic, etc. And I'm going to pull up a photo here for scale so you can see how big these statues are. Then you'll be taken to Kim Il-sung Square. If you ever watch footage of CNN announcing North Korea's latest nuclear ambitions, etc., with the video reel of soldiers, modeling rockets and on parade, that's here at that square.
It is the central square of Pyongyang, the capital, with a total area of 75,000 square meters. It is a historic place where, since Pyongyang City mass meeting took place on July 28, 1953, to celebrate the victory in the Fatherland Liberation War.
You'll be taken to the Arch of Triumph as well, and if you notice this arch looks suspiciously like the Arch of Triumph in France, it's because it was modeled after it. In true North Korean fashion, they just made it a few feet taller. Supposedly, it's the second largest arch in the world, and either way, it's massive. The photos don't do it justice. We're also taken kind of to a theme park where we got to ride roller coasters and rides with the North Korean elite and soldiers and things like that. So probably the second weirdest place I went to was the Pyongyang Maternity Hospital, and it was one of the most interesting parts of the tour. Supposedly the best, if not one of the best hospitals in the country, but honestly everything felt staged. I guess the idea behind it was they were like trying to show us how modern North Korea's medical system was, but ironically it had the total opposite effect on all of us.
This is the Tower of the Chucha idea. It is a monumental edifice which was erected to eulogize the exploits of President Kim Il-sung, the founder of the Chucha idea. The 170-meter-high tower was designed in our people's unique traditional fashion of stone tower construction.
Kim Il-sung University was also really interesting as well. The buildings there were stunning, both on the inside and out. All the corridors were made of real marble. Of course, a special emphasis at the university of showing us all these computers. Obviously, they weren't connected to the internet. Believe me, I tried to go on Google just in case to see. And of course, we got to go to the Pyongyang Metro as well, which looks a lot like the St. Petersburg Metro. It's one of the deepest in the world. And again, it was also fun because we got to interact a little bit with the locals on the train. Without a doubt, the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun was one of the most bizarre experiences, not just of the trip, but of my entire life. It's like the holiest place for North Koreans. And it's more specifically not just the palace, but the mausoleums of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. So you would never see any amateur vlog footage from inside the building, as filming is super strictly prohibited. So first you're taken after the security check to this long moving walkway that goes on for about 15 minutes with patriotic music blasting, and on each side of the walkways are all these paintings of Kim Il-sung doing things like providing field guidance on a factory or a farm, or riding a horse in the wilderness, and it just goes on and on and on and on for about 15 minutes. So eventually you get off, and then you're taken to another people mover, which is essentially the same thing, but this time of Kim Jong-il. After that, you're taken to this weird, like, kind of crevice in the wall where air blowers are pushing in all directions, and when you pop out, it is one of the strangest things you'll ever see. North Koreans crying hysterically. I don't think they were acting, but who the hell knows, right? And then you're taken to Kim Il-sung's mausoleums, where you have to bow and pay your respects. And then you're quickly taken to the next room, which is Kim Jong-il's mausoleum, where you must bow down again. So then you're taken to a room that shows all the gifts, awards, medals, and plaques, diplomatic thank yous, and government letters from leaders, et cetera, et cetera. And then you'll see, moving on, the diplomatic gifts. It starts to get a little funkier for the more modern ones. They're from organizations rather than governments. And I'm pretty sure, one I saw, it was like, the Juche organization of South Australia. I'm like, there's no way that can actually exist. But the most interesting part is where you can see all the countries Kim Il-sung visited with his train car. And then in the next room, you get to see all the countries Kim Jong-il visited as well as this train car. They actually left his MacBook Pro on display. So getting out of Pyongyang is going to be the highlight of your trip, because you get to see some of the countryside by bus. More importantly, the propaganda is just a little bit intense outside of the city, though still substantial. You'll go to Kaesong, which is a small, prosperous, I guess by North Korean standards, city near the DMZ. It's geographically closer to Seoul than Pyongyang. So what's really cool about Kaesong is it's an ancient city, perfectly preserved, because Kaesong belonged to the South Koreans for most of the Korean War, and then given back to the North Koreans after, so it was never bombed. And more importantly, this was one of the only times in the 6-day trip we actually had freedom to walk around outside on our own, and so I got tons of amazing pictures everywhere. They would not let you do this in Pyongyang. So it was nice to not have like 3 or 4 guides constantly breathing down our throat. And near Kaesong, of course, no trip to North Korea is complete without a visit to the DMZ. For a lot of world travelers, getting a photo from both the north and the south side of the DMZ is on everybody's bucket list.
In front of Panmun Pavilion, a building of the DPRK, there stand 7 buildings, which were used as conference rooms of the Military Armistice Commission and the Neutral Relations Supervisory Commission in the past. This is the conference room for ceasefire negotiation. In this room, ceasefire talk took place between the Korean People's Army and the US imperialists during the Korean War. This is the building for signing the armistice agreement. When the armistice talk reached an agreement on ceasefire and its machinery, the US side proposed holding a ceremony of signing the armistice agreement quietly in a temporary tent out of door. It was because the US imperialists were afraid that future generations might see the place where they signed a surrender document after suffering shameful defeat in the Korean War.
We were taken to a small room and given the North Korean version of events as it relates to the Korean War, which are almost totally different from what historians say. It was also really weird to see American soldiers on the other side looking over the DMZ in the middle of a North Korea trip. It was just quite bizarre. I'm taking one of you guys too. So then we went to Nampho. I don't know if it's pronounced Nampo, maybe, North Korea. It was a unique stop on our tour as it's an industrial town on the west coast. We went to a factory, I think it was called the Taeyan Machine Factory. I've been to a couple of factories in China before, in Mexico. It didn't really look that different, except there were like propaganda everywhere on the slogans and the wall. Following that, we were taken to a farm that had a kindergarten in it. To me, the farm felt a little bit suspicious. And so when we went to a kindergarten, you could see like propaganda posters everywhere. Regarding food, oh my God, they were just constantly giving us these like exaggerated, massive meals. I guess it was to show us about how much food they have, since the country gets so much bad press about that, and their people are supposedly malnourished. I went to the North Korean border on the Chinese side as well in Dandong, but do not recommend you do that these days, as the Chinese authorities cracked down. They got tired of Westerners and Americans, messing around there. So my trip ended taking a ferry from Dandong to Incheon, and that was an interesting boat ride, hanging out with a bunch of Chinese laborers. Before you ask, I really don't think any North Korean refugees can make it onto this ship from Dandong to Incheon, South Korea. So that's it for the tour itself. I guess I'll use the end of this video to give you guys some thoughts. Like I said, this is more just kind of telling you guys what the tour is like. I don't want to get too much into politics. Regarding freedom on the tour, generally speaking, you have very little freedom on the tour. You have multiple guides watching each other, watching you, watching them. I'll give you another example. One time I just peeked into a flower shop I wasn't supposed to see, in Pyongyang, and they like freaked out on each other going into a flower shop. And so there's also these rumors and perceptions that interactions with locals are all set up, but we're not that important. Obviously they're showing us like the richest part of the richest cities, the best dressed people, etc. But I'm of the opinion that the majority of the moments that we shared on the subway, at the theme parks, etc., were real. If you do want to talk to a North Korean about the situation there, I'd recommend, you go to Beijing and the North Korean district there. North Korea is just not the place to do it for obvious reasons. But I will say I have a pretty good idea of, what they showed us is what more the elites get to experience, not your everyday North Koreans. So, our guides spoke English, and, they weren't always propaganda machines. They did talk a little bit about some more sensitive topics and things like that. So you can talk to them, but, you just need to be careful on what you say. Not for you, but more for them. You can get them in trouble. So I think, going to North Korea, it's... whether it's ethical or not, you do get to interact with all these people, but at the same time, you are giving money to this government. It's a very sticky situation. I'm not really sure how I feel about that. So how much does a North Korean tour cost? It's not expensive. It's like $1,000 all inclusive. Maybe the price has gone up a little bit, but not by much. Another question people ask, is it safe to go? I would say generally yes, especially if you're not American. It's a very safe country. It's just not the right place to be asking tough political questions. You can save it for before or after the tour to give your opinion. So would I go back? Honestly, probably not. Beyond the ethical issues, not that Americans are even allowed right now anymore, but just beyond that, I've done propaganda tours, in Cuba, Venezuela, Belarus, other dictatorships. And North Korean was by far like the most suffocating. After a week, you just really want to get out of the country. And once again, Americans can't even go, and if you're thinking about coming to the US on an ESTA visa and the authorities find out that you went to North Korea anytime in the last 10 years, you will no longer be eligible unless you apply for a regular visa to go to the US. So I hope you enjoy this video, and while this channel will remain about travel hacking, aviation, and points, I'll try to talk about one adventure video I've done every month. Thanks so much for watching this video, and once again, this is Freddie from Points Panda, and thanks for listening. Once again, this is Freddie from Points Panda. Thanks so much for watching the entire video. I'd really appreciate it if you come check out my website. It doesn't cost you anything, and it's got tons of fantastic content, and you can do so by clicking that link to the left. Once again, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much, and I'll see you guys soon.